Model Context Protocol, or MCP. Most likely you have already heard about this through social media like LinkedIn or through the news. But in reality, what is MCP and why it is so important to know about it in the AI world? In today's video, we are going to explore a bit the beginning of it, since the initial agents or assistants and the need for them to call tools to integrate with the world. We are going to explore how the Model Context Protocol came to help solving and scaling the capabilities of agents to interact with the world. And we are going to finalize this video showcasing typical use cases where you want to implement an MCP. Let's go. Before talking about MCP, let's go back to 2024. When OpenAI released ChatGPT and the LLM models start getting bigger and more complex, also increased the need for the models to interact with real world. In the beginning, when we used ChatGPT 3.5, for example, if we would ask simple questions that were necessary to collect data from the real-time world, for example, getting weather, calling APIs to get stock information, the LLM models could not do that on their own because they do not have access to real world or real life data. So something was created to help solve that. It's called functions. And a function is a way for you to tell an assistant, back in the days, nowadays an agent. It was a way to tell the assistant, if you want to get this information, call this function, give me these parameters, and I will give you that information. So in reality, the models, the LLM models, they still did not have the capability of fetching data directly, but there was now a way for them to say, hey, the user is asking what will be the weather in Lisbon tomorrow, so please give me that information. And the agents would call the tool. And then inside that tool, that would exist some sort of logic, API calls, whatever, but code mostly. And that code would perform the action on the behalf of the agent, and it would give the answer. So in this case, the agent would say what will be the weather forecasts for tomorrow in Lisbon. And so that tool would call, for example, Open Weather API, and it would fetch the data for the agent. And the agent then receives the report and he can answer the user. So this was the beginning of functions, and the function, it was absolutely necessary to make the agents interact with the real world. But a problem starts appearing with using these functions. Because if you have a narrow AI use case that he simply needs to use one or two domains or concepts of knowledge, most likely he will have a small list of tools for him to call. But what happens if you want to build a more general AI with larger capabilities, for example, to assist a user, and you want that model to access a large amount of tools? Or what if you want the tools to be in another place, in softwares, in applications, in other sites, but you want your agent to know how to talk with those tools? And because of this need of scaling functions, Anthropic decided then to create the Model Context Protocol. And that's what we are going to talk now. So MCP is an open protocol that standardizes the way applications give context to LLMs or to models. But what does this really mean? So first of all, MCP, it's not an application, it's not a piece of code, it's not something tangible, it is a protocol. So it is a language explaining or specifying the way an agent should communicate or should be served with information from a server. So every time you hear MCP, it stands for the protocol. But then we can have two parts of an MCP. We can have an MCP server and an MCP client. And as the name indicates here, an MCP server is located in where, or it's located in the systems that need to give context to the LLMs. So for example, if I build an application that has APIs or has a database and I want agents to be able to fetch data from that database, the MCP server should be on my side. The MCP client, on the other hand, should be always close to the LLM models, to the agents. That's why there is already a large amount of agents, OpenAI, Anthropic Cloud, that already have the capability of, or already bring an MCP client capability on them to more easily connect to a server. And that is the beauty of the protocol, because you can have completely different AI, LLM models, assistants, or agents working in a completely different way, but because they follow an MCP, they follow the protocol, the way that they can connect to one MCP server, it's always the same. So it will work. And on the other hand, you can have one agent also connecting to a large set of an MCP servers, that it will always be the same. So what does an MCP server, in this case, gives to the different agents? Mostly there are three types of context that a server gives to agents: prompts, resources, and tools. In here we talked more about the tools, because I do believe that it was what it triggered in the beginning, the need of having an MCP. But in reality, you can also give other things. And let's go one by one. Starting with the prompt. This means that if you have in your system very specific information and a very specific way of requesting information or requesting some context, you may want to give first to the agent a prompt indicating how the agent can generate a certain response. So this way, we are putting on the server side instructions of how the agent should give a certain information to the user. Then we have the resources, and the resources, most likely, or the easiest way to consider them, is files. So you have in your computer, you have in the server, you can have different types of files: PDFs, documents, images, scripts of code, and you don't want the agent to pick a summarized content of the document, or you don't want the agent to call a certain tool to fetch information, but you want the agent to give the document. So in this case, imagining the user asks some question about a certain instruction manual, you may want to also give the PDF of the instruction manual to the user for him to see. And this is the resources. Finally, for the tools, you can imagine that tools should be used whenever you want to give context to a user, or you want the user to trigger a context on your side that basically exchanges information in an open way, so not a file, but information in an open way. And these tools can be used in two ways. So it can be used, for example, for the agent to request information from a database, for example, but it can also be used for an agent to trigger an action on the server side, for example, creating a ticket. So these are the three types of contexts that we can give in an MCP server. They are not mandatory. It is up for the person that develops the MCP server to decide and to inform what capabilities do they have on their side. But for each one of these three, the agents can ask a list, and then they can call. So imagining I initiate a connection or a session with an MCP server, and the first thing that I might do is tell me the list of prompts that you have, tell me the list of resources that you have, tell me the list of tools that you have. And then with the interaction with the user, I will call specific resources or tools or prompts. And in an overall, this is the MCP server capabilities. So when should we use MCP to facilitate the interaction between an agent and a system? There are basically three conditions, in my point of view, in my opinion, that can facilitate the use of an MCP. The first one is in terms of scalability. So if you have an agent and you want him to have a large amount of tools, capabilities, resources from one system, and you want to organize it better so that you do not need to manually configure each function on the agent side. So in that case, it will facilitate if you create an MCP server and an MCP client to manage to deal with the management of the tools, the resources, and the prompts. So in terms of scalability, you might want to use an MCP. But also, if you have an application, for example, and you have a large amount of APIs, you integrate with other systems. For example, you have an application that integrates with Dynamics, that integrates with external payment systems. So if there are a large amount of APIs, most likely you will also want an agent to be able to call those APIs, because it follows more or less the same pattern that you want. So if you want an external system to be able to perform operations on your system, you might also want an agent to perform the same logic with the same authorizations, authentications, and validations inside the system. So if you have a large number of APIs, most likely it will be also handy for you to create an MCP server to extend those APIs to AI agents. And third, a bit following up the same of the second point, if you want to make your system or your applications agentic ready or agent ready, you will want to develop MCP protocols. So you will want to expose the capabilities of your applications to the outside world. And we already see that with a lot of systems nowadays. There are a lot of applications known in the market that they are already creating their own MCP servers so that agents can automatically interact with those applications. So in today's video, we talked about Model Context Protocol. We started going a bit back to the beginning of assistants or LLMs and the appearance of the first tool capabilities or tool calling. And then we scale into nowadays what is the MCP, the Model Context Protocol, and we explore what is a server, an MCP server, an MCP client, and the capabilities that the MCP offers, such as resources, tools, and prompts. And we finalized the video discussing with what are the best use cases for us to consider implementing an MCP server. Hope that this video could help you understanding a bit more the Model Context Protocol, and I hope this can help you visioning what your business can leverage by using such protocol to make your business agentic ready. Follow me for more AI videos. Have a great day.